Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to the Gandhi TV. You're here with Dr. Gandhi, and today I have a guest. She is a long lost friend. She's been a friend for a long, long time, and then we lost touch with each other for several years in between, maybe 7, 8 or so, right? Something like that. Yeah, and now here we are again. We reconnected about 6 months ago, and we've been in conversation mainly based on spirituality. So I thought it would be a perfect time to talk to Monal about her journey and what her story has been so far. So this segment I've called it "What's Your Story?" and really I just want to talk to our guest today, Monal, about what her journey has been so far. So first of all, let me welcome Monal. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your story. I know this is a hard, this can be vulnerable, and so it's a tough place to be in. But thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
For inviting me.
Yeah. So, Monal, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you first started on, or what was your mindset before you were on the spiritual journey? What was your life like at that point?
Yeah, so I think, as a Indian woman, kind of born into a lot of the norms that are taught by your parents, and the culture and the society. I was following a very set path that was given to me or handed to me. You go to college, you get a job, you maybe get a higher degree if that's what you want to pursue. You get promotions, you buy a house, you get married. Typically, you have kids because you got married, right? Very set path of how the generations have lived before us, and how they will continue to live potentially after us. Somewhere along the way, doing every step of what was prescribed for me by society, by parents, I kept following. There was something that was missing within me with every next promotion, with every next thing I bought, with every new car, with every new house, with every new phone, everything that money can potentially buy for you. I had it all, and yet something was missing. So every step of the way, I kept thinking to myself, if I just have this, then I'll be free. And then if I have this, then I'll be free. If I have financial freedom, I'll be free. If I have a husband, I'll be free. If I'll have the next promotion, I'll be free. And it's all a mind game because you keep thinking to yourself where this freedom and where this fulfillment is going to come from. And typically you think of it as an external thing that will give you that freedom or that will give you that stress free mindset.
Hmm.
Um, so that was me before the awakening process started.
Where did you get that mindset from?
That was probably what was programmed within me starting at very early ages of my life. A lot of it was how a woman is supposed to be treated. You are an object. Your parents typically think of you as a burden to them because you're born into uh, a family. Most parents feel this obligation of, even though dowry system in India is very much gone, it's still this mindset of obligation that parents have typically, that a daughter is a burden, a son is going to take care of us. These are very, very deeply ingrained thought processes that um, most Indian families have, for that matter. And probably more so with Gujarati families, because that's what I'm exposed to, and that's what you're exposed to. Um, that's where I got this mindset of I'm a burden. I have to go find my own way. I have to get married to a husband because a man is supposed to take care of you. Um, and that's your destination, right? Marriage is so career is not a focus, education is not a focus. Anything and everything you do, you're aiming your life around 25, 26 at a destination called marriage.
Hmm.
And then your lifestyle, supposedly, right?
Yeah. That's been, like you mentioned, that's been the programming for me as well. For me, it was career focused, not really so much marriage, because the guy side is a little different. For me, it was, hey, you got to be this kind of engineer. And so my whole mindset was, my river was just flowing towards engineering, and it didn't consist of anything else. It was such a narrow stream that was trickling down to engineering. So I completely relate to that. I completely get how we have been conditioned to think a certain way just because of our upbringing, because of the environment that we lived in, we were surrounded by for the first 7, 10, 15 years of our lives. So what started it for you? What started that shift from this old mindset to an awakened mindset? Were there like one incident? Were there a couple incidences? What stories are around there that caused that shift to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I look back at history now, there were moments and memories and things that I always felt deeply as a intuition guide. I would talk about Buddhism, I would relate to that, I would write about it in my journaling at age 14, 15, 16, and then somewhere I deeply got into the marriage focus mindset, right? I think probably between the years of 18 and 26, it was the only focus of my life was I need to find a partner and I need to get married. In that process, somebody came along in my life that tried to show me the spiritual path or tried to make me understand that there was a life outside of the programming and that was much more meaningful. But my conditioning was so strong, and you are the average of the 5 people that you are around. So when you're deeply ingrained living with your family, with people, you're attending these functions with people that have the exact same programming and conditioning, you're you're only naturally going to look at that as your perspective because your perspective is reality for you at that point in time. And if you don't understand another perspective, then you're likely not able to see what anybody else is talking about, right? If you can't see it, you're not going to believe it. So somebody did try to come along, and that connection was so strong that it was hard to describe in words, which led me into deeper understanding of astrology, deeper understanding of numerology. Again, I'm looking for answers outside of myself to understand driven behavior, look for answers because somewhere in my knowing, I felt that there is a reason for this connection. There's a reason for uh, the feeling that I have of maybe a past life connection. So that's also where I kind of started into the past life research and trying to and this is 2007-8 when the internet is still semi getting started, where there's limited information out there about astrology, numerology, about spirituality in general. So it started the process, but the conditioning that I had was so strong, the focus was so strong, the parents' mindset and society's expectations felt reality, right? This is how everybody around me, my friends, my cousins, my brother, everybody's doing this. This is the path. This is the rat race. I have to run the race. Corporate life, all the people that you went to college with, they're all progressing in their careers, then you naturally feel inclined to do that. Facebook, all these external factors that really condition our minds subtly for the most part because we're not mindful and aware of where this conditioning is coming from. It's coming from all directions.
Right. And so you had glimpses of going outside of that conditioning. You had glimpses of life outside of that when you were exposed to astrology, but then you went back into the conditioning. Is that what you're saying? So you went back into the conditioning, started to go into your career, and then what happened?
And then I went deeper into it, right? I got married, um, and the conditioning just followed even deeper. Now your friend circle become much more limited. Um, so you start drinking, you go out, you live for the weekends, you live for the baby showers and the next wedding and the next time we're gonna have fun, and the fun and the freedom. It's always externalized to another event, to another people coming over, to another celebration, because you're still not able to find fun within. You can't sit and relax. Um, that's how society treats you in a certain way when you're so deeply in that conditioning. Come out, do this, do that, go to Garba, do this, do that. Everything is you have to do this, you have to do that. Work also puts a lot of pressure on you. It puts a lot of, especially because I was in consulting, I was traveling 4 days a week, I was meeting people all the time. It was a requirement that you go out to happy hours, go for drinks, do this, do that. You're constantly exhausted and tired, um, and you keep going deeper and deeper into that hole. Right? You're trying to live up to expectations of the marriage. You're trying to live up to the expectations of the career and everybody else's expectations of you, and you keep falling deeper into an abyss of darkness until one day you wake up. And so let's talk a little bit about what woke me up. I think if I had to kind of put a, a point of where that started for me was a trip to Machu Picchu. I think that's where giving myself the ability to put myself in a situation that was very strenuous and very spiritual in its own way. I think that journey taught me about myself in a different way. And then it just progressed. So that happened in 2016. And I did a 7-day trip there. And that the feeling of Machu Picchu, which is why a lot of people go there, I think it really started the ability to start to manifest how I was feeling and how I could do it in my physical life.
Mm.
And then separated in 2017 from the marriage, but we had been talking about that since 2015. A large part of what my inner desire was to go live in the Himalayas and live in an ashram. And these are thoughts that I have no idea how they got planted into my, somewhere they got planted into me, or maybe it was intuition. And so I would keep saying these things. I would say, I want to go to the Himalayas. I want to go live there. I want to go do social work. But there are still these ties of corporate life and career and money and greed and the next house and the next car. There's a dichotomy of my being and living, because my heart desired one thing, but my mind kept telling me, well, you need safety, you need security. How are you going to support yourself? And that's also a reason why a lot of people hang on into a marriage, because it's the same fears that kind of circulate, right? So
Being very comfortable.
one it's very comfortable. You're very much in your comfort zone. You're very accepted by society to be in that comfort zone. You're not very accepted by society when you start to separate yourself from that conditioning, which is one of the fears, right? Log kya kahenge. This is a very famous Indian mentality problem, right? What are people going to say? And you get stuck and hung up in that programming much more often than not, right? So when I decided, I actually proposed to my husband in 2015 that I would like to start the separation and divorce process. He wasn't ready, which is natural. I mean, if somebody told, like, I told him that my desire was to go live in the Himalayas in an ashram and do social work, and that was not his life path. which is 100% understandable, right? So you shouldn't force somebody to do something that they don't want to do.
Right.
And if that was my calling and not his calling, we both came to an agreement, and it took him some time to get to that place of acceptance that it's okay to have this stigma of divorce, because it took a lot of inner strength for him to get there to that acceptance. So allowing that time and space for him. So we started that conversation 2015. 2017, he finally was able to come to acceptance and move out. And we were able to peacefully resolve a very hard situation for most Indian people. The word divorce is a very stigmatized and wrong thing to do. And to be able to have a story like ours, where we're both still friends, still happy for each other in each other's paths and progress, peacefully resolving a very difficult situation with no lawyers, no drama, no family involvement, really just coming to terms with two people understanding each other's needs and respecting it and letting each other go in their own direction
That's true love
was,
right there.
yeah, yeah. And that's sometimes, to understand love, you have to understand that you can detach with love. It doesn't have to be, it's actually much more important to understand love in that perspective, that you have to let the other person be happy.
Right.
And if you're not happy, don't force somebody to be with you because of a paper or a society stigma, right? You have to, if you love somebody, you have to let them go.
So now
It
you
was
went through this divorce, separation, and you're starting to awaken, right? So now your mentality and your mindset is starting to switch over into this awakened mindset. So what has happened since then for you? What has changed since your mindset has been evolving and elevating?
I think so. Going to a dark place, very dark place. You get into this lost mode, and it's a spiral where you feel literally like everything in your reality has just dropped, and you have nothing to hang on to. Right? Every conditioning, every mindset, every important thing in your life, it kind of spirals out to nothingness. And it's a very scary feeling at first, because when you let go and you surrender to this acceptance of what will come, you go into this deep solitude, which also can look like depression, which can look like a lot of things. You're constantly purging and you're reflecting and you're understanding yourself in such a deeper capacity to understand, what are my limiting beliefs that I've held on to for so long? What are my the conversations that I had with myself were the most negative talks ever. Uh, and you spend so much of your time talking to yourself in your head and you don't realize it. Whether it's somebody that tells you something, hey, Varun said this to me, in my head, I have an automatic conversation about what he's thinking or what he's feeling, right? This is the tone you have in your negative
Right.
talks. When you become mindfully aware and start to change your tone of how you're talking to yourself,
Hmm.
that takes a lot of alone time. That takes a lot of reflection. That takes a lot of journaling. That takes a lot of
What worked for you?
uh what worked for me. Um I think YouTube worked for me. You go into a lot of videos and try to understand. It literally is like taking your mind as an object and reprogramming it to be the way that you want it to talk to itself. Um, so a lot of affirmations, a lot of, and it's reprogramming not just your conscious mind, but your subconscious and your unconscious, which have been programmed for such a long time that it takes a lot of dedication.
Right.
Me, I would really very similarly to how if you're training for a triathlon, you would get very focused and you would get very intentional about making sure that you're going for the run, you're going for the swim, you're going for everything, right? Like that when you get that focused and disciplined, it's the same way I think about emotional fitness in your mind, right? Because your thoughts control your emotions. So to understand why you're feeling a certain way, you have to understand what are my thoughts that are causing these feelings for me, right? So you have to get to the root of understanding your thoughts. Um, 90% of them are negative typically because of learned behaviors, learned fears, right? So when I tell people, for example, at this point in my juncture, I've sold my house, I've sold my car, I've quit my job, and I'm going to India as a woman. When I tell a lot of people in that um, juncture of my life, a lot of projections come out from people's fears as a trained thought process. A woman in India traveling by herself, naturally, the first thought that comes to people's mind is fear,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if I don't carry that fear myself, what I'm typically understanding from people is their projection of the fear. Now, what naturally happens is when you're not trained in your mind and you have the fears, and 10 other people impose their projection of fears onto you, then you forget how powerful you really are.
Right, right. So then, when you were uh, deciding to go through, quitting your job and selling your house, I mean, that must have been a hard transition for you, right? Because you've done something for so long, you've lived a life for so long, and now you're giving that up completely in the US and you're moving to India where you've visited many times, you've lived there before. So you know the place, you know the area, but just that whole lifestyle change from going from the US to India is going to be it's like a whole new mindset that you have to carry with yourself, right? You have to get accustomed to how people in India live and how they operate. And so what was going through what were you going through when you were thinking about it, and when you were going through each of these steps in the journey, like, hey, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to sell my house, and what was going through your mind and how were you feeling at that
A lot of emotions, roller coasters, a lot of programming coming up, of uncertainty, acceptance of like you, especially living in the US and having had the very comfortable life that I have.
point?
It's hard to go ahead.
No, go ahead, continue.
It's hard to understand what would make one person go 180 degrees from having everything to having nothing. And it yeah, go ahead.
It's hard for people to fathom that because it's they're not many people do that. And so like you mentioned earlier, they've lived their life a certain way and people around them have lived the same life the same way that they're living their life, so they're conditioned to think in that same mentality. And now you come and you're breaking the mold and you're saying, being an Indian woman, you're quitting your job, selling your house, selling your car, and moving all the way to India to do social work. I mean, there are people that do that in this day and age, but it's far and few in between. So people will not be able to fathom what you're going through, what you're doing, especially in our Gujarati community, in our Indian community, because of our mindset being so stuck in one place. You mentioned earlier that you had gone through a lot of reprogramming. You're reprogramming yourself consistently, right? It never stops. You always have conditioning that comes up in different ways, different behaviors, different actions, that we have to be present, aware, and observe it so that we can break out of it. You mentioned I want to actually keep it practical now. I want to talk about certain techniques that you've used to reprogram yourself. So you mentioned affirmations. What are affirmations? How did you use affirmations to reprogramming yourself?
Yeah, so I think it becomes very important to understand your what what my thoughts were, what my constructs of thoughts were, right? So affirmations, whether it's you saying it out loud, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through guided meditation, whether it's through listening to YouTube videos, or talking to friends that are going to give you positive reinforcement about yourself, right? And helping you to change about yourself in a different way. A lot of it comes from you asking questions to people saying, "Hey, how do you perceive me versus how do I perceive myself?" Right? And what are some areas of improvement? What are some things I'm doing well? Having those conversations, I think, is very important because sometimes we get very stuck in our perception of ourselves and have these blinders on. So close friends and family asking the questions to understand yourself better and why your negative self-talk is, and validating that that negative self-talk is just in my head, it's not real. um what are affirmations? They're positive ways of thinking about yourself, right? So every time I would have a thought of I am not capable, for example, or I have fear of being in India, right? I could counteract with an affirmation of I am capable, I am resourceful, I will be able to figure things out. I have figured things out in my past when I didn't know any of it. I have been out of my comfort zone in my past and I have been able to overcome, right? So every time you would have this negative self talk that starts in your mind with a you're gonna suck, you're gonna be horrible, you're gonna be you're not gonna know anything, you're gonna have people that are gonna take advantage of you, right? All this programming that's kind of in your mind starts to um over analyze. It's like the analysis paralysis. You have to counter it, act with very positive messaging for yourself, and give yourself the love and care that you would to a dear friend, right? So a lot of times I've asked a lot of my friends recently when they start talking negatively about themselves. I would ask them, if it was me that had made that mistake, or if it was a dear friend of yours that had made that mistake, would you forgive them? Would you love them? Would you accept them? And it's so much more important to do that for yourself, right? First. So to be able to understand yourself and say, hey, I made a mistake. Okay. Do I still love myself? Do I accept myself for making that mistake? Did I learn something from it? Am I grateful for something that I learned from that situation? Empowering yourself with those types of thoughts, right? And taking yourself out of the situation or the circumstance, and always having the mindset of what am I grateful for? What did the situation teach me about myself? I think that's been one of the most powerful tools for me. Is I look at the situation very objectively and say, whether I'm in it or out of it, right? What is this teaching me? Why is life happening for me? Why is this situation happening for me? What is it teaching me? And when you start to recognize the patterns of the same things that keep coming up in your life, because until you resolve it, that same pattern will come through another person. You hate your job, or you hate a coworker, or you hate X, Y, and Z, or a family member, or whatever your situation is, where you're putting it out externally as this person is causing me to feel this way. When you change that and take ownership to say, I'm feeling this way, why am I feeling this way? What is it within me that I need to resolve to not feel this way, right? When you take ownership of your own emotions and your own thoughts without the external person, situation, whatever that looks like, you can resolve it much faster and that pattern will disappear. It
It's
will
like
automatically.
the phrase history repeats itself, or his story or her story repeats itself, right? So your story was repeating itself until you actually resolved it. And you kind of mentioned that maybe in a personal conversation, that in 2015 you had talked about going to the Himalayas. Actually, you mentioned earlier in the call in 2015 you had talked about going to the Himalayas and going to India and doing social work, and now you're actually doing it. You've quit your job and you're leaving this Saturday. In 3 days, you're going to be gone to India. What what's there for you in India? Do you know?
Yeah, so I think, like I also talked about, you are the average of the five people that you surround yourself with, right? So you have to become very mindful of um, who is around you and what are they teaching you. Is it that are they reinforcing the same conditioning over and over and over again, or are you learning something new that when you do, your eyes will be wide open and you will feel inspired? So I intentionally put myself in a situation like that last year. In December, I went to a yoga retreat where I didn't know anybody. And it was in India, in the middle of the Himalayas. And that was a dream that I had put out in 2015, that I wanted to go live in an ashram in the Himalayas. And I did it in 2017. Um, and I met 15 people from 15 different countries. So when you start listening to other people's stories, and you will see glimpses of the exact same things that you have desired. Sorry, I got a call in the middle. Um, so when you start understanding other people's stories and perspectives and options that are out there, or a different way of thinking, right? You're exposing yourself to a different way of thinking. And what that very literally means is exposing yourself to a different way of reprogramming yourself. So I met people that had quit their jobs, that were traveling um, for 8 months, 10 months. These were women that were from different countries: Australia, South America, South Africa, all different ages, 15, 16, all of these people that um, were able to do that. It kind of gives you a perspective of, I think I'm capable of doing this. If I really sat down and focused and tried to figure it out, are there resources out there on this amazing thing called the internet that you can use for your benefit? Um, I figured out there's tons of sites. There's tons of ways that you can go do social work if you want to, and travel at the same time, and meet people that are like-minded, and do projects, which is what I did my MBA to do project management and program management, so I could use those skill sets that I've already developed, but do it for a good cause and make it that much more meaningful. So I came across uh, tools and sites that will enable me to be able to figure out what projects I care about doing and how I can make an impact and travel at the same time and do yoga and meditation at the same
Yeah, that is tight. That's amazing. I'm so glad that you have found that. I'm so glad that you have, quit your or left. I'm not gonna say quit. Quit sounds negative. But you're leaving, intentionally leaving your job to do
time.
social work in India, huh?
It's by choice.
By choice. Yes, it is by choice. You're not quitting. You're leaving.
I'm
Uh,
single by choice. I'm leaving the country by choice. I'm selling everything by choice. I'm homeless and jobless by choice. Uh,
and
but it's all for a better purpose.
yes, it always is for the highest purpose on in this universe. And I'm so glad that you found this path, that you are now living your dreams. Well, that's been a wonderful conversation with you, Monal. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for your vulnerability. It's it's hard to have conversations like these sometimes, and that's the reason we are having these conversations, because I want the Indian community to know and to understand that these conversations are normal now. Let's have more of these conversations. Tune in, listen to my show, come and talk to me, and let's have these conversations, record these conversations, so more and more of us in our community can get used to having these conversations. So I know, Monal, you had a lot to share. You have a lot, you are a role model because you're an Indian woman leaving her job and going to India, leaving her marriage, leaving her career, leaving her house, leaving her dog, leaving her family, everything, leaving everything and going to India so you could serve the greater good. You could serve humanity. You could serve the universe. And that is very bold of you, Monal. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for sharing your story. Your journey has been amazing, and I support you in everything that you're doing. And if there's anything else that I could do, please let me know. I know you're gonna have an amazing journey in India, and you're leaving this Saturday, so it's 2 days, actually tomorrow. You leave tomorrow. Wow, you're gonna have such a wonderful journey ahead, and I already know that. So Monal, thank you for joining in, and everyone else in the audience. Again, tune in. We're gonna talk to another person very soon, and they're gonna share their story. So thank you guys for tuning in. It's love and abundance, and we'll catch you guys very, very, very soon.